Legendary director Francis Ford Coppola returned in 2024 to unleash a science fiction film that he'd been trying to make for decades. The result is a bizarre passion project about reshaping New York City. Today, we try and make sense of Megalopolis. Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
I come in peace.
This is a science fiction movie podcast. We get together and talk about a movie we watched. And last year there was a pretty notable release from an acclaimed director, someone who's made some of the most cherished classic films of all time. Mm-hmm. He put out a new one, which just happened to be science fiction, and that film is Megalopolis, a movie which at one point, given the reception, I had considered moving to our Patreon show Extra Reels, but I decided that since it was a new science fiction release, by default it should be on this show. Mm-hmm. Right? We can't just shift things off just because they're supposed to not be good.
I specifically remember this was originally slated for a new release, for you wanting to catch up on that algorithm wave. And something happened. I think it may have been scattered release dates. I think you may have got it at a different time than I did.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, that's why it wasn't done when it was in theaters, because it ended up being delayed, like internationally or whatever, or maybe even I got it first. I can't remember, but either way, it didn't line up, so it just wasn't that possible to do it. Francis Ford Coppola is the director here.
Great.
Doing this. It's been a while since he's made a movie, and he apparently, did a lot of self-financing on this, had a lot of investors, had to spend a lot of time getting it made. A passion project, if you will.
I was actually shocked at how few production logos there were at the front of this. I thought for sure with it being a self-finance thing, there would be like 30 of them.
I mean, it's possible that a lot of the companies that finance that aren't production companies, so don't have they're listed as financiers, but they're not necessarily ones who want to brand themselves as a movie studio.
Fair.
So yes, he got the local bakery to chip in. Yeah.
He just went around with a little clipboard saying like, "Hi, my name's Francis Ford Coppola. You may remember me from your childhood. Could I have $1?
Can I put you down for $5,000? Okay, Thank you. I'll credit you." So I mean, we'll start spoiler free. Although I don't know if I could spoil this if I tried. So, but
as I'm watching this, I'm thinking, wow, I have to talk about this. That's going to be difficult.
So, yes, we'll start spoiler free. We'll give you warning before spoilers. And of course, if you're liking the show on YouTube, please do hit the button. It helps out a bunch if you do. And you can, of course, support us over at Patreon and get some bonus shows that we do over there. But I'll tell you more about all that stuff at the end. So, the premise of Megalopolis is about a man named Caesar and what is New York? I don't think they ever quite say it, but they do reference other places, and it clearly is New York. So
they call it New Rome, which I guess that's the name of the city in this world, but it's like at one point they literally show the New York Stock Exchange and it still says NYSE on it, so it's New York.
Yeah, honestly, it's such a alternate reality feeling of a movie that when someone referenced a Hitchcock movie, I went, wait, you had Hitchcock movies in this world? That doesn't feel right. It feels like this is a different world that we're watching. But he's an architect of sorts. He wants to build a new city. He wants to replace New Rome with Megalopolis, a new city for the future. Think Delta City in RoboCop, I guess. But artistic, not more greed-driven. Yes, more artistic. And he wants to advance everything. Oh, and also he has a superpower. He can stop time.
You can't just drop that. You can't just say, "Oh, by the way," because you say it like that, and it sounds critical to the plot instead of once again just being an artistic flourish.
I cannot believe how little his ability to stop time actually matters or impacts anything throughout the entirety of this movie. I'm like, what the hell, Francis? What the hell?
Did you ever see, it was a little indie film called Cashback? You ever see that one?
I can't say I have.
It's just about like this artist who works in like a grocery store or something, but it's the same sort of thing where he has theoretically the ability to stop time, at least in the narrative of the film. It may be a metaphor, but it's the same sort of thing. It doesn't impact the plot at all as much as you think it will. It's just kind of there for the sake of artistic integrity.
Which is fine if it's like if it's just metaphorical and it's not really happening. It's fine that it doesn't impact anything because it shouldn't be able to impact anything. But you should understand clearly what it represents in his mental state for everything else that's going on, or how he's escaping reality because he has to because it's too much stress, or whatever the metaphor is that you're going for. But wild. And so okay, just all right, before we I want to run down characters
yes, because this one has a stacked cast.
Yes, but we're not doing that first. First I just want to answer the question. David, what did you think of Megalopolis?
Well, Pete, I get what he was going for. I think I understand the sort of metaphors and the ideas that are going on here. However, I hate this. And it's not that I hate it for like quality or writing reasons. Like those also have their own issues here, but like just at the core fundamental value of what he's doing here, it's kind of an Ayn Rand sort of thing going on where it's like, all of the normal people in the world can't do anything to fix their stuff, but one great man is able to come forward, and we should just allow that great man to do whatever he wants, because that always works out well. I just hate that idea on a fundamental level, and that is ultimately what all of the movie is about. So right there, already going uphill. Add on top of it, I have never, outside of some very, very poorly made student films, I have never seen more pretentious dialogue throughout the entirety of this movie. It is just a constant stream of Shakespeare and like, oh, but what is man? What could man possibly? I am but a god in my own mind. Shut up. Shut up.
Now, just 1 minute. I feel like you're pointing out the pretentious dialogue, which you're right about. However, I feel like you're leaving behind the pretentious imagery which also accompanies much of that dialogue.
Oh yeah. No, I was getting there. Because that also is like, from the very beginning, you've got this strange, it's not green screen. Always. Sometimes it is. I don't know how to best describe it. It reminded me a lot of, sadly enough, modern Zack Snyder films. In the way that like, the background is just kind of something extra going on for the sake of having something visual. And it's so much all the time. There's all these montages and strange visual effects, and it's at times interesting, but most of the time just baffling. I have no idea what's being said with most of this. And then finally, yeah, it's barely a plot. Like, I don't know. I looked into the Wikipedia article, and apparently there is supposed to be this massive parallel to some ancient Roman conspiracy that happened called the Catalina conspiracy. I read into it. I see where it's coming from, but like, that doesn't turn this into a good movie. It just makes it, oh, hey, I remember this history class, and now it's been changed into the modern day. So yeah, I got a bunch of stuff I want to talk about with that conspiracy as well, but I'll leave it there for now. Not good.
Yeah, I didn't know how I was going to feel about this, right? Obviously, I wasn't expecting something that was good, and I definitely was going in thinking, oh, it's going to be some like auteur, egotistical, pretentious kind of thing, but part of me was hoping that, okay, but I kind of hope I love it anyway. Like, I kind of hope that the madness of it is going to be so like fun that even if it's technically shite, I will at least enjoy the journey. And there's definitely like the odd choice or the odd moment where I was like, oh, that's kind of such a like up your own ass choice that you've just made there, and I think that's kind of funny. but there's also so many stretches of montages of nothing happening of any note, and it's just like it's a tedious experience for, I would say, about 70 to 80% of the runtime. And then there's like little pockets of like, okay, that one scene was kind of interesting, or that one. And honestly, watching this, I couldn't help but feel that I'm watching an old man, Francis Ford Coppola, just be a pervert and just do whatever he wants. All of his sexual fantasies just being lived out on screen. And it started early, it crescendos, and look, I love Aubrey Plaza, I do. So I'm not going to say there wasn't some raw satisfaction of like one memorable scene with her, but it just felt dirty. I felt like as an old man telling her to do these things, and I'm like, this is your fantasy, you pervert. That's what this is.
If ever you have to act out your fantasy, and the part of where you would be is being portrayed by Shia LaBeouf, you need to get new fantasies. You need to dip out.
Shia LaBeouf with a ponytail.
Oh, God, that's not a ponytail. Like, at times it's a ponytail. Most of the time it's just a straight mullet.
Yes. Okay, so yes. All right. Adam Driver plays Caesar Catalina, who is the architect with the time-stopping powers.
Yes, he created a thing called Megalon, which is this miracle material that is like the only thing besides the time-stopping powers that makes this movie sci-fi.
Yeah, well, the art style and like the alternate city also makes it sci-fi. Like
I wouldn't say that an alternate reality inherently makes it science fiction.
It kind of does.
Well, no, because you can have like, you know, you look at like the Gladiator movies. Technically, those things that happened in the Gladiator movies never happened, but it's being portrayed as actual history. No, it is an alternate thing.
No, you're arguing two different things here. That is that's still supposed to, in theory, be in our reality. It just never happened. That's different from this is a artistic alternate version of the world where there's different technology and things like that. And
I get what you're saying with but like that's the different technology. It feels like is just Megalon. Like I don't feel like they really do anything else that's except that every once in a while, like people tap their wrists and then like something happens. Well, it's like, oh, okay, I guess that's magic.
Yeah,
watches.
But he's building a whole new city with it, and you see all these structures that are all unique and like.
I agree.
Like, you get anal about what you decide is sci-fi or not. I'll tell you, it's sci-fi. Just live with it. It's not good sci-fi, but it's sci-fi.
I'm not going to argue the point that it's not sci-fi, but I feel like the sci-fi aspects of it kind of boil down to Megalon and time stopping. Everything else it's political intrigue. Like that's it. That's what it like. It's because of everything they do with the ancient Rome stuff. It may as well just be the same sort of thing as Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, where it's like we're taking a really old story and we're just updating it to modern day.
Don't get me wrong, that comparison is very apt, but it doesn't matter if there's a little bit of sci-fi or a lot of sci-fi. It's still sci-fi.
No, that's fair.
You're obsessed with like categorizing this.
I'm agreeing with you, Peter. Take the win.
I'll win. I'll win again tomorrow. I'll win again the day after, and I will enjoy my streak. Thank you very much.
I was I can't remember where I read it once, but it's the difference of how audiences understand things, specifically when reading, is if you have a passage say the door opened, then people will just read it as, you know, a normal door opening. But if you say the door dilated open, then all of a sudden everything from that point on is science fiction.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay. Giancarlo Esposito plays the mayor Cicero, who doesn't like Caesar very much. There's a bit of backstory there, but we'll get into that in spoilers, I guess. But he doesn't like him. Another main character is his daughter, who's kind of the main love interest, Julia. Right, that's Nathalie Emmanuel. So
have I seen her in anything?
I think I've seen her in one or two of the later Fast and the Furious movies. I don't remember her in them, but according to IMDb, she's in them. So
Game of Thrones, she was Missandei, so I recognize her from that.
That's fair. And as mentioned, Aubrey Plaza plays. Now wait for this name. Aubrey Plaza plays WoW Platinum.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah, she's like a reporter. Not that that actually matters for very long. She kind of goes into other things, but she starts off the movie as a reporter.
Yeah, her whole character bit basically revolves around she is reporting the news, and then she wants to be at the center of the news. She wants to be like famous in her own right. So that's where WoW Platinum comes in.
Yes. Shia LaBeouf is Claudio Pulcher, who is the cousin of Caesar Catalina, and he doesn't really like him very much. And their grandfather is John Voight, playing Hamilton Crassus III. And he's just, like, you can tell he can barely act anymore because he's so old. So sometimes when he's just shouting things out, I'm like, you're just an old man yelling words that you've been told to yell. I just don't feel a performance.
There's a bit at the end, without spoiling anything, where he kind of resolves an entire plot on his own. And his acting choices in that scene did not feel like choices. They just felt like it's all he was capable of.
Yeah. So he's there. We also have Laurence Fishburne, who's the driver of Adam Driver. And he's also the narrator who spouts Roman history lessons at us every so often for some reason.
I have to assume that Laurence Fishburne has, like, an agent dedicated solely to getting him voiceover work for narration bits, because he's doing it all the time.
I mean, that's true. Although, if I remember correctly, I think young Laurence Fishburne was in Apocalypse Now, so I think maybe his being in this might actually just be more that he knows Francis.
Oh yeah, entirely. That's Coppola calling in that favor, being like, "Hey, buddy, I'm finally making that movie I was talking about back when we were filming Apocalypse Now."
It probably was. He's probably mentioned it when they were waiting around for the weather to clear up.
Yep.
Adrian's in this. Talia Shah is.
That was such a shock to me
Adam
when I
Driver's
recognized
mother?
her.
Yeah.
I was like, so you didn't return for the Rocky sequels, but you decided to come back for this. All right.
I even the reason I recognized it was because they show like a photo of her younger at one point, and I went, wait a minute, that's Adrian.
I'm just skipping slightly ahead here because I don't think we really need to mention too many more of these people.
No.
Where the hell was James Remar? I'm seeing him in the cast list. I don't remember him in the movie at all.
No, I think he was like the guy who was helping Adam Driver when they were talking about building stuff. He was like standing there.
Oh yeah. God, he wasn't in this movie at all.
No, he was. He was like a minor bit part. Yeah. So, like, I don't know what to say about some of this, to be honest. I mean, like, this movie, forgetting the director for a second, when I just look at the actors and I look at them on these kind of lavish sets or like surrounded by green screen or whatever, all I can think is that this is something that's attractive to an actor who's into performing, is they get to do something big and grandiose that's harkening back to Shakespeare and like Roman tales, and they get to spout all this fancy dialogue. I imagine a lot of them have massive boners for doing stuff like this, regardless of the quality, and that's how, I mean, that plus just the cash of, it's the guy that made The Godfather who's doing this. Right. We get to work with him. Because I'm watching this and I'm like, this is bad. Like, for pretty much from the get-go. I don't think the opening scene arguably is actually quite interesting, but after the opening scene, it very quickly, you hear dialogue, you see characters interact with each other, and it all just kind of, you're like, oh, that's what this is. This is this. And you just settle in for it. And all I could think is that this is a movie made by a bunch of people who probably really enjoyed making this because they loved like the theatrics of it all and been able to enunciate and so on and so on. But the actual end result is a goddamn bloated mess that just forgets plot lines for long times, doesn't really have much in the way of satisfying conclusions to most of them. Like, the central conflict seems to be between the main character, Caesar, and the mayor for much of it, and the whole fact that he's dating his daughter. But then there's an entire part of the movie where it just kind of like, that goes into the background, and we focus on an uprising thing instead for like almost the rest of the runtime. It just shifts completely. And it neither of them really merge together, and when everything ends, I just kind of feel like, you've not earned this moment at the end. Nothing built to this. I'm just... What is this?
I think this is a perfect representation of why you shouldn't be working on the same script for 40 years. Like, this is absolutely an issue of, he has kept coming back to this over and over and over again. And he's been adding these new ideas and he's been tweaking things and doing that. But it's not with this idea of, I have this solid idea in place and I just need to tweak a few little things to get it perfect. He's coming back to this each time for like 5 years at a time with new ideas, with new concepts. And he's trying to force those into the original thing that he had in place. So by the time you hit the end of this, we have entire sequences that are Trump parallels. And remember, he had this idea in the 80s. Like, this was not something that was already in place. This is when he was going around at this time. These are things that get inserted into the movie. And it just feels so out of place and broken up to the point where, like you're saying, there are no earnings of endings here. Things just happen and then they stop. And that's the gist of it.
And to be honest, while it's very clear what themes and subtext he's going for, almost at no point did I ever feel myself going, oh, I like this works, or I get exactly what you're saying. It's almost, it just kind of feels like, oh, I'm just going to put every possible like political theme that I can into this. I'm going to put every sort of theme about society into this, and that's kind of what makes it feel like some sort of like hokey, almost student movie where someone, oh, I'm so smart because I'm going to put all these things in here, and it just feels like a mess. And I laughed towards the end because again, no spoilers or context or anything, but there's a speech made towards the end, and it just cuts to stock footage of Hitler and like 9/11 and stuff. And I sat there going, I know what this movie is. This movie is if Neil Breen had a budget and real actors in it.
I said that exact thing to my fiance. Like, I watched this independently, and the first thing I did when I finished up, I was like, you know those Neil Breen movies we watched? Like, I was talking about, like, oh, the government's so corrupt and all that. Imagine that with a budget. I said those exact words.
That's I mean, not the whole movie necessarily, but that scene, that speech and cutting to that footage made me go, oh, this is Neil Breen. This is Neil Breen with actual like money and credibility and able to just do whatever he wants with real actors.
I'm gonna fight you on the word credibility there, but yeah, the rest of that.
Well, he once had credibility, which is allowing him to do this. Is, I guess what I mean to say, but yeah, absolute just nonsense. I just, for an example of the pretentiousness and just like the over-the-top stuff. And this is the sort of thing where, like, I could have, like, if you establish a visual style in little sort of surreal kind of things you're going to put in the images, I could have seen me liking this if it in a different kind of context. But there's a scene in this movie where Adam Driver's been driven through the city, and there's, like, statues of, like, sort of Romans and stuff that start to sort of, like, wake up and, like, fall over as if they're dying. And it just kind of felt like, oh, like, you could have saved so much money by just not having this, because it's not doing anything.
Again, it feels like it makes sense to him. He knows exactly what's going on here, and anyone who wants to take the time to like really look into the Roman history and all that, because I mean, if we're being straight up with it, the larger theme, the larger idea being played with is, with New Rome being a thing, it's America as an empire collapsing the same way that Rome collapsed. That's the ideas going on here, and whether or not it can be averted or changed or stopped. The concept of all these Roman structures and like Roman gods or whatever collapsing around, I'm sure contributes to that metaphor very well. It does a great job of saying like, hey, look, here's the destruction of the things that we originally held dear when we made the empire. But it doesn't work for a general audience because we don't have a textbook in front of us telling us the entire history of Rome. We're just kind of saying, oh, that looks like Roman stuff, as is everything else we've established in this world.
I mean, no, it's just a case of like excess, and there's no restraint. Like, you have like the movie almost split into chapters with Laurence Fishburne like quoting like old, or maybe he's not quoting, but he's like saying stuff in the style of like Roman scripture. And there's like this sort of like almost stone like engraved text coming up on the screen, and then you've got the statues falling over and all that, and you've got lots of parallels like, oh, this arena is the Colosseum kind of thing. You've got all that going on, and I think that, see, if you paired it back, we don't necessarily, because there's lots of things in movies that people put in that they've researched that the general audience aren't going to get entirely. But you can have a little bit of something. You can have a little bit of symbol. If you had like one moment where he sees what looks like a statue like collapsing and falling over, and in a moment where like oh, this is at the point in the story where things are at their worst and he feels like he's losing whatever battle he's trying to fight, and he looks over and sees this statue crumble. We can infer from that, oh, he's relating to whatever that historical figure went through back in the day, and he's at that point now where he's crumbling. Even if you don't know exactly who it is, it can work without understanding all of it. But this, not only does it happen early on before we have that much context, it's like, hey, here's 10 statues all falling over one after the other. It's too much. It's excess.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like it's not something, and there's a lot of sequences like this in the movie, but it feels like it's specifically supposed to be non-diegetic. It's not supposed to be something that's happening to the characters. It's just something that's happening for the sake of the audience, the visual flair.
Wow.
But everything in the visual style is telling us that, like, no, this is something that's actually happening in that scene.
Well, I think that's open for debate in a sense, because I think one of the other things that the movie kind of gets at but never properly explains is that along with his time-stopping powers, he has like a third eye, like a sight into seeing the world like as it's going to be or as it can be. So I think he is seeing these things. They're not necessarily physically there, but he's seeing these. And I think it's also implied that Julia kind of has that power too, because she also starts to see things.
Yeah,
like
there's a whole argument to be made for how much Julia is also a little magical baby or whatever. I don't care.
So it's more than just a metaphor, but I mean, yeah, this movie's not interesting because I just like, okay, you know what? Spoilers, right? There's no point, because none of it matters. You're not like, most of you are not going to watch this. Let's just be honest with yourselves. You're not going to, and you shouldn't.
I'll be straight up with the audience here. I'm not going to tell you how I watched this movie, but it's not on streaming. It's nowhere. In America, it's nowhere. Like, you cannot find this movie.
Yes. It is rentable on your Apple accounts in the UK, though, if you really wish to put yourself through said pain. Yeah, I just... So, right, I thought there was... Again, this is foolish of me thinking something's going to be a big deal in this movie, but they kept cutting back to a shot of this satellite in space, right?
Oh my god, the satellite pissed me off so much.
Right. They keep coming back to the satellite, and there's like a Soviet like flag on it or whatever, and it's floating around, and they keep saying, oh, it's going to like fall into the earth at some point, and we know where it's going to land. But then just before it's going to do this, it kind of goes off course, and it's like, oh, it's not going to land where we thought it would. And it's like, okay, it's going to land actually into the city, right? All this debris comes down. And this is actually a great example of how frustrating this movie is, because the actual shot of all this debris coming down through the atmosphere and towards the city actually looks quite pretty. It's actually quite a beautiful, kind of dreamlike version of like a big apocalyptic kind of visual, right? But
you got this interesting shot of the lights and like shadows of people like screaming in pain and like writhing around against the buildings. Like, it looks good. It's got a good visual style to it.
No. You jumped in too early there, because I was about to make fun of that. That's the part that ruins it.
I liked it.
No, the pretentious garbage of the shadows of people acting in fear that are 100 foot tall on the sides of these buildings. Nonsense.
I will not argue the pretentiousness at all. Like, it's absolutely pretentious, but like, I at least can appreciate the fact that he's coming in and having like a vision for this. Like, I can appreciate the fact that it's not just a matter of, oh, big explosion happening and that's all like we get from it. It's something that at least feels different and new here. Is it good? Probably not, but I could at least appreciate the fact that I'm seeing something that I haven't seen a billion times before.
I just, like, again, the idea of seeing people's shadows on the sides of buildings rather than showing the people themselves as this is happening, because the light of the well, not meteors, but, you know, the debris coming down is like so bright. Like, great idea, but why are they so big? Why are they all practically dancing? You know, to give off these shapes on the walls. I don't know, just a bit too, again, too much, just a bit too far.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This movie is 100% like, at a certain point, what actually makes sense and like literally is happening stops, and then it just continues on with and this is kind of the vibe I'm going for. This is the mood that should be established here, and it's absolutely just made up crazy nonsense. If you actually assume, like, you know, the giant shadows dancing are like actually representative of people's bodies or whatever, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It's supposed to be more representative of all the people dying because of this. My problem with this sequence is that it doesn't matter.
No, nothing.
Nothing about this satellite crashing.
There's no consequences.
Does anything.
There's zero consequences.
They specifically say, and the nuclear fuel inside. And I'm like, oh God, it's going to be like a nuke drops when this happens. No, nothing changes.
The main character 2/3 of this movie gets shot in the face and it doesn't matter. He just gets better.
It kind of matters only because they then spend the next like 15 minutes making him out to be like new Jesus. Like he's got like this weird third, like you said, the third eye power, but now that he's got his own material inside of him, people look up at him like a god.
It's like glowing like wire or like framework that sort of fills in his face. So he's walking around with this glowing kind of part of his face for a while his face heals. So he's got like Wolverine magic powers as well, basically. Okay. Okay, let's pick a character or something and stick with them, because I cannot go through this in order. It's impossible.
It really is. All right, here's the thing. I'm gonna. It is actually somewhat difficult, because I think all of the major main characters, this does do a good job of keeping them all intertwined. It feels like there's nobody whose plot stays entirely separate from everything else.
Yeah, well, I mean, they do connect in small ways, but I feel like for the most part they are over compartmentalized into their own thing. Like, let's take Aubrey Plaza for example, right? So, Well Platinum, introduced at the start, she's this like crappy reporter who's dropping F-bombs in her interviews, and she's interviewing the rich old man of John Voight who owns the bank, right? What I don't know if we know what bank, just the bank.
The bank.
Right? And she's kind of flirting with him during the interview, and he's kind of making eyes at her, and I'm like, oh, this is gross. What is this? Right? And then we find out afterwards that she is currently having some kind of romantic attachment to the main character of Caesar, right? She's waiting for him, she's in a sort of skimpy outfit, and she's like, hey, Caesar, it's time to finally, make this an official public thing. I want to be a power couple. My ratings are down. I want to go further. And he's not interested. He just kind of doesn't really pay attention to her, and he just leaves, basically.
Well, she says something about, like, I love you or whatever, and he's got the whole dead wife backstory.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. We'll get to his
It's
stuff
a whole
separate,
thing. So,
right?
yeah, he just dips out at that point.
He dips out. And she turns the TV back on and sees her own interview with this old man as he's flirting with her. And she gets this look in her eye like, oh, I've got an idea. Right? And the next time we basically see her is a montage of like the newspaper reports and TV things of her marrying the old man. She's married into the family because the old man's the grandfather of the main character. So she's kind of married into that family. And she's now the young wife to this ancient man who's clearly not going to be alive for much longer, although he did get a prenup. They bring that up because the entire middle part of the movie, which is this celebration, is for their wedding at the Colosseum, where they have wrestlers and stuff. Also, they auction off a virgin at some point, but we'll get to that.
Yeah
Right?
Yeah.
And yes, so we'll come back to that, because I feel like despite the fact that celebration is for her and him being married, I feel
it
like
doesn't matter.
Yeah, all the stuff that actually we're going to talk about there is nothing to do with them. So, right, her whole thing is this, but she still likes Caesar, and when she meets Julia for the first time, after Julia's kind of now with Caesar, she's like, hey, the old man is mine. This is my house, my rules. And thirdly, and this may surprise you, Caesar's mine too. And so she clearly still wants Caesar. And there's a scene that pissed me off, like 2/3 into this, give or take, where Caesar comes to meet Wow Platinum, right? And she's out in the cold, it's snowy, and she's in this sort of like skimpy dress and all that. And he comes up and he's like, why are you not wearing a jacket? And he takes his coat off and he puts it around her and warms her up. And she's like, oh, because I knew you'd give me yours. And she basically tries to say, hey, this is our chance, Caesar. I can take the bank from the old man, and you could come with me. And he just kind of basically says no and walks away. And what frustrated me about this scene is I'm like, what did he think this meeting was for? Like, why did he come to meet her? Because I thought there was an implication that he was still maybe seen her occasionally sexually, right? Because there was a scene where Julia was a little bit paranoid about another woman being over. But it kind of seemed like by the end of the scene that No, she just called him out of the blue, and the reason why is because she wants to stage a coup, and she wants to get him on board because she's in love with him.
I'll be completely honest with you. I didn't even realize it was a meeting. I thought that, like, she was just standing outside his building, and as he left one day, it's just like, what are you doing? Why aren't you wearing a coat? Like, I didn't think it was a meeting.
No, it seemed like this was like a we'll meet here at this time kind of thing.
Fair enough.
Not that it's that important or matters. Her big plan, though, to fulfill what she wants to do, is to rope in Shia LaBeouf's character, who, throughout the movie, he's basically just summed up by being a little loser who really wanted Julia, is pissed that Julia is now with Caesar.
And as the movie reminds us very often, banging his sisters.
He's banging his sisters.
That does not go away.
We never see it, but yeah, he is just one of those sniveling little like rich boy screw ups who just gets whatever he wants. It's a whole thing, and but he's always hated Caesar. Even his kids, he's always hated his cousin Caesar, to the point where he's even like starting to like try and like talk to the protesters and stuff who are mad about buildings getting taken down, and he's saying things like, hey, screw Caesar, here's some money, yeah, follow me. He's trying to build a following by being quote-unquote
he's turning
generous.
into a populist.
He's
he's putting himself saying like, yeah, we are the 99%, but also follow me as I rise up to fascism.
So okay, got that. Basically, he is like been wanting to like try to get like more money and stuff from his grandfather. He wants to like inherit the bank and whatever, but his grandfather's like, oh, you're too much of a screw up, blah blah.
Cut your hair.
So Aubrey Plaza, right, World Platinum comes into the bank building, right, the office. Shia LaBeouf's also there in this office, and this scene is.
It's so simultaneously like, oh yeah, Aubrey Plaza, and then, oh god, Shia LaBeouf. And like, I want to scrub it from my memory, but at the same time, it's like, oh, I hate it.
She immediately says, how does this dress, look, or whatever? And he's like, oh, it looks hot, right? And she's like, hey, that's wow.
Anti-wow. Yeah, not anti-platinum, anti-wow.
Which, it wouldn't be anti though, would it? It'd be step-grandmother, but that's whatever.
I think typical term for that is anti.
Really? Okay.
Well, I mean, someone who marries in after the fact is rather than called grandma. I don't think anybody wants to be called grandma.
All right, okay. Whatever, that's fine. And then she's like, how does it make my ass look? And he's like, I can't see. So she turns around and he says, oh, looks hot, auntie. Right? So this scene, this language keeps continuing where he keeps saying, like, anti-wow after he says things. Some of them very dirty. And it very much is just one of those step family porn videos that you might have encountered on the internet. Francis Ford Coppola's been watching some Pornhub, and he really liked the idea of putting one of those scenes into his movie.
Look, if we go with the ancient Rome metaphor, that was more common back then.
Sure, okay, sure.
Fine, if that's the way we want to take it. My problem comes with how they don't shy away. It's that
they don't shy away.
No, they do not. He shies away all the goddamn time. Look, it's an issue of the same sort of excess you were talking about before. With this sequence, they do a bit. There's a tiny little shot where they show her turn around and bend over the table, but it's done in shadow. Like you see a shadow against the wall of her doing this, and then Shia approaching her, getting down behind her. Like, fine. I'm okay with that because there's the implication it's happening, and then you can do whatever the hell you want in this fake little shadow play. But then they cut back and they hold on that shot, and you are not given any respite. You are not given any safe harbor. You have to see it all playing out here.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't show that much, but you do definitely see some Shia pubes that are just kind of casually sitting there as he's lying there naked.
And that's the part that makes me want to scrub it. I'm like, no, stop. Oh.
Yeah, because it's all this dominant fetish. It's her saying get down and holding his head into her, and then like saying get on the table, and she's the one on top. And because the point of this, so let's examine the scene and what the purpose of the scene is. The purpose of the scene.
We have to.
The purpose of the scene, David, is that she is seducing this naive, controllable someone that she can get her claws into and completely puppet, right? She's seducing him with dominant sex, and he's falling for it, and he's going to do whatever she says. That's the purpose of this, is to set up that she's now got him under her thumb, and he'll do what she says.
Yes.
You can show that by just the first part of it, really, right? Just the first part of him getting down on his knees and like sort of saying, yes, I'll do whatever. But of course, she then says her entire plan whilst having sex with him, so that we get to hear more of it, but so that it just spells it all out to the audience, which this is not the sort of movie that it feels like it spells out a lot of other things, because a lot of it's nonsensical. So it's really weird which parts they've chosen to really emphasize.
Pete, I get what you're saying.
Yes.
I understand of like the purpose of the scene and all that. And you're right. It went a bit too far with spelling it out, but I think it didn't even need that much, because the very next sequence, is them putting the plan into action. Shia LaBeouf's going to talk to Crassus and saying, hey, I want to help work at the bank. Please put me in charge of some stuff.
And she cuts off his ponytail when they're having sex, and it's kind of the implication being that she is going to present him as how the grandfather says he should be presented, so that he'll worm his way in. And this theme of her doing cutting sounds with her fingers is then like a motif here for the next couple of minutes.
Yeah, see, that's the problem I have here in terms of excess, is that like, okay, you want to show that she's conniving and dominating or getting away in. Literally, the next shot is showing them inside this sauna, steam room, whatever, and her leg is just kind of in front of the fourth wall, just like dangling, while snake noises are playing.
Right, let me explain this more properly, right?
Okay, please.
So it's just him and his grandfather in the scene. She's not in the scene, but they're presenting her in the foreground in almost silhouette with these sound effects, like you say, and she keeps doing this thing where her fingers come up and you hear the sound effect of scissors. It's this idea that she's cutting up the family, she's cutting up the regime that is, so that she can be the one with the power. And it's all in the foreground, her in silhouette, and it goes on for a little bit. Like, they really milk it for a good few minutes, and it seems to mostly work to the point where when they have a party afterwards, and she's got this ridiculous dress on, which is like 2 gold snakes that are like just covering her nipples, but nothing else. Yeah, it's just again excess. And the climax to this, right? This is where I'm like, okay, Coppola just lost his goddamn mind, because her and Shia LaBeouf come into the bedroom in the big fancy mansion where Jon Voight is sitting there under the covers. They walk in, and I notice in the next shot, after like a few seconds, I'm like, wait, is he tent poling? It looks like there's a rise under the covers, shall we say. There's a peak. There's a peak where I do not want to see a peak, but there's a peak. Yep. And then Jon Voight says maybe the most memorable line in the whole movie.
In cinema history.
He looks at Shia LaBeouf and says, do you like this boner? And I'm like, wait, whoa, it is a boner. I thought I was just noticing like a fold or something, and my mind was like going...
a poor camera trick of the light.
But no, he's like, yeah, one look at her and it gets me going. I just, I wish I could do something. I'm an old man, you see. He goes on for a bit, but then he pulls down the covers and reveals that it's not a boner. He's got a bow and arrow underneath the covers, and he kills Aubrey Plaza's character by shooting her right in the chest, and she dies.
Then he shoots Shia LaBeouf twice in the ass as he runs away.
He gets away, although the angry mob gets him outside after his ass has been liberated from the arrows.
Notably, because we've been skipping over this a bit with all of his rallies and stuff like that. Notably, the angry mob that gets him is upset that their money is gone, and they're all wearing red hats.
Yes.
I wonder what that means, Peter. It's so subtle.
It's all right. It's not like anyone's getting access to the treasury or anything that may cause problems.
Not. Pete,
Jon Voight was practically a background character throughout this. Yeah. Like, obviously, he had a purpose in the plot, because it was like, this is the old man that she's going to like take his money and do whatever with, right, and get power. But the fact that he all of a sudden has agency in one scene at the end where he kills another prominent character and just wraps that plot up neatly is so weird.
Again, it's that same, like I was mentioning before, the idea of the great man sort of thing, and how you just got to let people do their stuff and everything will work out fine. It's this Randian theology, this idea of how structure should work. And all I could think of is the crappy Atlas Shrugged trilogy that I sat through at one point, where it's this idea that if you just let rich people are rich because they are inherently better than people that are not rich. That is the core of Randian philosophy, and anything that gets in the way of them doing their stuff is a hindrance to the rest of the world. So to see this at the end, where this dude, who is a banker, who in the tale of this story is a decent enough guy, at the end of this movie he says, I'm going to leave all of my stuff not to Shia LaBeouf or my new wife, but to Adam Driver, and they will know me as Cassius the Generous.
He
and
says
I'm like,
that.
oh my God, this is the most dick-sucking thing I've ever seen in my life. For Megalopolis.
Do you know the whole thing about the Megalopolis? Like, so it's like, okay, so this movie starts. They explain clearly early on that he has this vision of this new version of the city that's going to be better, and it's a bit controversial because he's technically tearing down some homes to do it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where maybe some of the conflict, like, is he a good man because he's still tearing down homes, blah, 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 right? Yeah. I cannot believe how little the actual building or, like it feels like the idea that he's building this city is just something that's brought up every once in a while as his goal, but we never actually, it's not like he's actually trying to solve problems that are related to that, or like, it's, you know, it's not, because a movie, sometimes we're the goal, right? Maybe it's like a sports movie or something where it's all about getting to the big game, so you spend training for the big game, or maybe a better analogy for this would be like a bank heist movie where it's all about planning and planning and planning, and then you have to pull it off. Like the idea at the end, you feel like you've got it. And I swear at the end of this movie, it's just like, oh, Central Park's just Megalopolis now. It just kind of happened. Oh, okay. Yeah. I guess.
Whatever.
Yeah. So the movie begins anyway with Adam Driver. And I didn't hate this scene. This was a fine scene to show that, like, he's different. There's got stuff going on. It's got a really cool kind of tone and vibe because he's up on the top of this skyscraper. He's stepping out of his window and he's sort of teetering at the edge, and he puts his foot out. He's on one leg. And he sort of starts to stumble because he's losing his balance. He's going to fall off and die. And then he just sort of says freeze or whatever word he says to stop
just
it.
Like time stop or something like that.
And time just stops, and he just sort of stays there at an angle off the thing. The clouds have stopped moving, the city below stopped bustling, and he just like regains his balance. He composes himself, and then just sort of snaps his fingers, and everything starts moving. And it's got a cool atmosphere. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Maybe this movie will be all right. that was kind of cool.
Man, there's someone in the editing bay. They knew this is the best it's going to get. We lead with this, and maybe people won't be able to get refunds on the way out the door.
One of the main posters is this moment.
Yeah.
This is what they were selling it on. Because I thought, oh, when the satellite's coming down, maybe he's going to use his power to save the city. Maybe he's going to stop it in its tracks and somehow get rid of it. No, that's not a thing.
That would be a plot for some other movie. Honest to God, though, here's the thing. Maybe this is just because I could feel the pretentiousness coming off of it, but this whole sequence plays out, and I'm like, all right, this is good. I'm a little bit weirded out by the like sky thing you're doing, where it's like time lapse of clouds going by rather than just normal speed clouds. But all right, I'll take it. The moment the sequence ends is the moment it comes up and says Megalopolis, and it looks like it's engraved in stone. And
I think I know what you're going to say. There's a little two words underneath the title that I think you're about to bring up.
Yeah, it says Megalopolis. It's engraved in stone. I'm like, okay, they're going for an architecture thing. That's fine. It feels a little bit pretentious. And then slow fade in underneath. It says a fable, and I'm like, screw you, man. If you need to give the context of your movie, is like, not only is this a movie, but it is it's something that we all must talk about and think about, and we must it will take us on to the next generation in the American dream. And that is not me just saying that, putting words into the director's mouth. That is Adam Driver's speech. He says that. He says, well, I don't really know all the answers, but I've got us talking.
He says a lot. The line that got me is, what is consciousness if not a burst of your soul coming up or something like that? I was like, oh, you shut the F up.
My favorite one was when he's on the drug trip and he just keeps repeating like the same 5 lines over and over again. And one of them is like, if God is created in the mind. If I can create God, then what is man? And I'm like, sure.
It's nothing. It's talking without saying nothing for like 90. Okay, so it's introduced him, right? It kind of makes it clear to an extent, and then it introduces Julia. And this is where I started feeling the pervy, like, sort of Francis Ford Coppola stuff, because there's a lot of shots in this club of her and, like, I think it's Shia LaBeouf's sister, and they're, like, licking each other, they're dancing, everything's all sultry and seductive, and this is just what they do. This is how they hang out, apparently.
Yeah. She's just like a party girl. That's the thing. They're really putting forward that she's a party girl. She doesn't have any sort of responsibilities. Her father's the mayor, and she can just do whatever she wants.
And I thought a big part of why there's going to be a connection between her and Caesar is that when Caesar's demolishing a building, he freezes time in the middle of the detonation, but she can see it. And I thought, she's also special, and they're going to like bond and connect, and I guess technically, yes, that's why she's like interested in going to speak to him because of this moment. But I swear, like, it just does not matter. It does not, like, it never becomes a thing that like they use for any reason.
There's it seems like he keeps a stop time thing to himself. It doesn't seem like it's something he tells everybody.
Yes.
And then there's one sequence much later on where after some events have happened, he's lost the ability to stop time. And he just like tells her that. He's just like, I can't stop time anymore. And she's like, yeah, you can. Try it again. And then it works because the power of love.
She like, says that was the other thing. Part of his speech is, I believe it was a speech. I think it was a speech he did like after the satellite thing, but he does like a TV interview or whatever, and he's like, I don't have the answers, but as long as we have love, love is everlasting. Love has been with us since the dawn of time. Love will see us. I'm like, shut up. I hate this. I hate it so much.
Anne Hathaway is currently on a spaceship going interstellar.
Don't you dare. Don't you dare. That movie is that movie's pretty good, but it is like a masterpiece compared to... It is. This movie is The Godfather compared to this.
Which is very ironic, all things considered.
Yes, because this guy made the freaking Godfather. Somehow things have went awry somewhere in the past 50 years, but here we are. So they established that, and they just sort of treat it as this thing where she makes a reason to come and see him when he's having breakfast. It's under sort of false pretenses, but they kind of bicker a little bit, and it results in him showing her his vision of the future. And what is actually in the room is just a bunch of like boxes and trash that's been like sort of like almost... It's like, you know how like Doc Brown always says, apologies for the crudity of this model. This is like the crudest possible model of what this city's going to be, but she has that third sight that he has, where she sort of sees what it's actually going to be based on what's in the room. Yeah, and she's wowed by it.
Just to interject one scene that we skipped over.
Oh, go on.
Is... we get this sequence where the mayor, they have another model built, and the mayor is revealing that they're going to build a whole like casino.
That's thing, right. And there's like press and stuff. There's like people around, and Adam Driver shows up to crash the party. Which reminds me, Dustin Hoffman's in this movie randomly, yelling things.
Crazy that he's not even in the top listed cast, because he is actually around for a decent amount. But no, what gets me about that scene is They do the bit and they say like, oh yes, we're going to build this thing. And then Adam Driver comes in, and the gist of the scene is that he's already reserved the land because he's part of something called the Design Authority, and this is where he's going to build Megalopolis. Like, that's the plan. But he doesn't just say that, or he doesn't do that in a way that's like, okay, well, we'll just have him come in and say it in a very pompous and formal way.
No, he gets his Shakespeare book out.
He does the entire to be or not to be speech from Hamlet, beginning to end, and then begins to say, hey, everybody, I want to build Megalopolis there.
That was the moment where I'm like, I think I hate this movie. That was the moment.
But that was also the moment where you could tell, like, I can see why the actors signed on to this movie.
Oh, yes,
they wanted to letting them do whatever they want.
Yes, and I think there's a part during this scene as well where... I can't even remember what Adam Driver's saying, but he repeats something, and each time he repeats it, Dustin Hoffman yells a word at him, and that was making me laugh.
I remember Dustin Hoffman, he jumps in, Adam Driver's saying like, yeah, we're going to build all this stuff out of Megalon, my magic material I made that got me the Nobel Prize. And Dustin Hoffman just goes, cement, cement, cement.
Yes.
And it's like... Someone check on Dustin Hoffman, please. It seems like he's having a bit of a problem.
But that wasn't all of it, because he was like, cement, steel.
Like, okay, buddy, we get it. You're into your old materials.
These are the things that keep us safe. All these stuff. But yeah, so then it becomes kind of their romance, but at the same time, it also feels like it ignores a lot of the main beats of what the romance actually is, because she ends up getting hired by him to be like an assistant, right? Which the mayor's not very happy about.
Yeah.
And a big part, so right around this time is when the Aubrey Plaza old man marriage is announced, and they have this big Coliseum celebration. And Adam Driver goes there with Julia as his assistant, and he's doing, meet and greet stuff to begin with, and that's why she's there. But at a certain point, he says, "Hey, you're not my minder. You're here to assist me. What now that I'm like, we've done all the work stuff, you're off the clock. Go and have some fun. I'm going to go.
I'm going to get plastered.
Yes.
You do not have to babysit me."
And I swear, this like 20-minute period of the Coliseum was the most mind-numbingly boring part of this whole movie. I was like, I was like almost into a daze, just staring at the ceiling, like, please let this set. Because there's parts of this where he's just like off his tits, and he's just like dancing, and there's like extra arms behind them. They're doing like the that kind of thing.
Like and the Hindu goddess sort of thing.
And it's cutting back to like the circus performers or the wrestlers, and there's just lots of random stuff going on. And all of it is irrelevant. Eventually it gets to kind of a plot point, which again ends up not mattering much. But the big plot point that happens at the end of all this is that Shia LaBeouf has decided to try and ruin Adam Driver's reputation. So what he's done is, apparently, part of the ceremony here is that a young virgin will be auctioned off to rich men for their...
That's not entirely what happens.
That's basically what they're doing. Come on now.
Yes. Okay, so just to explain this plot briefly, there is this recurring thing that comes up in the beginning of the movie, that there's this pop star whose whole bit is that she's 16 years old and she has made a purity pledge. She is like, I will not have sex with anybody, that is me. And everyone views her as this bastion of morality, and it's like, wow, if we can have this in America, maybe we aren't so far gone.
So they auction her.
So they get they get to the Coliseum bit where she's putting on a performance, but before they do that, we decide to get, I think, the most heavy-handed line in human history, which is Adam Driver uses the Megalon to make a dress for her, which is essentially transparent, not in that you can see her naked body, but that it allows you to see what is behind her. And she says the line, as we're done with this, "You can see right through me." And like, yes, we get it, you're invisible, but obviously there's the secondary motive of, clearly you're not who you're saying you are, and we can all see right through you. Fast forward, she's doing her bit, and the auction, ostensibly, is that the auctioneer is saying, hey, rich people out in the audience, what would you, like, help her maintain her virginity, help her maintain her purity. Can I hear $1 million? And it ends up getting like $100 million for someone to maintain her purity.
Yeah. That's what's going to happen, right? And then just as the auction ends, the footage that Shia LaBeouf sort of forced like someone backstage to play at the end of this is a sex tape of her and Adam Driver, and everyone's gasped and just shocked, and everyone's to the point where Adam Driver, when he sort of stumbles out the building not knowing any of this has happened, gets arrested for statutory, we're on YouTube, so I'm going to avoid that word, but
yes.
Right, so, and Julia's like, no, this isn't right, like, he's innocent of this, blah blah blah, right? And then almost immediately, like within like 5 minutes of like no drama or tension, right? Because there's a little bit where she goes and gets like her birth certificate to prove that, she's lied about her age, she's actually 23, so he's not guilty of anything illegal, right? And then, the mayor rips up and says, I don't care, right? 2 minutes later, the news report, we found out she's actually 23, and also she's lied about everything, and also the footage was doctored, so all of this did not matter.
Not only did the tape not happen, because Shia LaBeouf just made it up, but also she's actually 23, and also because she's lied about everything else, the sequence then decides to end her plot by showing that she goes from this like ukulele strumming purity looking person to like hardcore punk, and she's like, yeah, screw you, I'm not who I say I am, I'm something else entirely. And then we get a bunch of headlines that say like, America's doomed, we're all gonna die.
It's basically when Miley Cyrus decided to show she was a bad girl. That was basically what they did here.
Pretty much.
Right?
And I guarantee you that's when he wrote it into the script.
Probably. And the other thing is that while I say none of this mattered, and it didn't, it could have mattered if the point of it was, okay, Adam Driver knows someone tried to royally screw him. Like, someone's out for him. But he does not care. He doesn't even think about it. It never even comes up. They don't talk about it. It does not matter to anyone.
And again, I just to connect this back, like, everything is back to Roman mythology, because the singer's name is Vesta, and Vesta is apparently the goddess of, like, virginity and family and stuff like that. Like, she is... It's all going back to old Roman mythology at every step.
Sure is. All right, so just to backtrack for a second here, we have to have Adam Driver's dead wife, because this informs... This is partly why Julia is adamant that he's innocent, because while some people have speculated that he murdered his wife, in fact, the mayor...
Including her father.
The mayor was once a prosecutor and tried to prosecute him for it. He was acquitted. They never proved that he did. But her body went missing, and the sequence where he's seeing all the statues wake up is actually him driving to this like place, like an apartment or whatever, in a different part of the city. And this is like another example of like him seeing with his third eye, like the other world or like the other dimension or whatever it is, where he goes in and his dead wife is lying there in the bed, and it's like it's like imagine like a hospital scene where you go in and you sort of like sit by your loved one who's asleep and you sort of pamper them, kind of thing. Right? And Julia follows him because she's curious about him at this point. This is right after she's taken the job, I think. And she sees this, right? But she sees him like there with an empty room. There's no one there. But she kind of like also kind of sees what he's seeing and sort of thinks it's sweet that, oh, he loved his wife. He couldn't have murdered her or something.
I'm not convinced she sees what he's seeing, but I do, like, he's sitting there braiding her hair, and the movement is still carrying on in the real world, and she's like, oh, he's doing, it's him caring for his dead wife. Oh, okay, he's got a heart. Yes,
so she's kind of like convinced he's a good person from that point on. And that's kind of that. So,
yep. It's basically enough for her to rebel against her father and say, like, no, you've got him all wrong. Because she starts out the movie saying, like, you're an ass, you're evil, you killed your wife. And then she comes back and just like,
I don't know if that was the exact word she used, but yeah, that was the sense of it.
More or less. No, she used a lot more pompous, huge language of but are you not a man of this city like all others? Are you not shut up? Just use normal language. Goddamn.
Right. So after the whole Coliseum incident, he's up in the rafters, right? We already saw this location earlier when he was up here with his telescope with her. And now he's up here, and there's a couple of girders also hanging around. Why are those girders up at the top of the building where there's nothing else there, and they're not expanding it? I don't understand. But
I don't understand why they decide to have this clock be a platform that you walk on instead of just keeping it off to the side.
That's one little detail I don't mind in the context. If I was watching like a fun superhero movie and the supervillain had this clock platform at the top of his lair, I'd be like, yeah, that's cool. That's right. Excessive and fun.
But the villain.
Yes,
like, that makes sense to me for the villain. For the hero, for the guy that we're supposed to be rooting for that's going to save humanity, it feels a bit strange.
Yeah. And he's like, I can't stop time, I'm impotent. And she's like, that's not true. You can get your time dick up anytime you want. And he's like, you know what? You're my muse. I love you. I stop time. And then I swear their entire romance of falling for each other is just this montage. And I couldn't tell you a single thing that happened. No.
Yeah, no, it's literally just if you're talking about this idea of like building the city, theoretically, that's what this montage is, but it's all kept within his office, and it's entirely consisting of him telling the people who I guess are actually out on the street, like, yeah, no, but like, make a human pyramid, and then like try to climb down on top of each other, and that's the shape I want. It's like, okay, buddy.
Yeah.
You're insane.
Because he also has like and we saw him playing with it earlier. I assume it says Megalon stuff, but he's kind of like looking at it, and it's like he's seeing stuff in it. And there's like one point where Julia comes in, and he's like obsessed because he's really far into building the city now, and it's just this like big sort of series of prisms of like this material all floating above him, and you can see like stuff in it, and he's like looking at it really intently, like he's looking at all the possibilities or something. It
looks like it's mostly his past, because I'm seeing a bunch of stuff. You hear some audio of like arguments, and it sounds like it's him and his dead wife talking. And then you see, this is the weirdest part for me, is that apparently the way that they thought she died was by an overdose of insulin, where she was given too much. And then we also see from his perspective, her taking her own life by driving a car off the road and landing in water. I don't understand how insulin and drowning could be confused with each other, but whatever.
Well, I think that it's implied later when the mayor admits that he knew that he was like prosecuting him under false pretenses, that they had intentionally like altered the autopsy report or whatever. Like it was like a cover-up kind of thing.
Oh, I missed that bit, but fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, it was mostly implied, but like that was the gist I got from it. Yeah, and then pretty much like 2 scenes later, she's like, "Oh, by the way, I'm pregnant," and he's like, "What? A baby?" Yeah. And I swear at this point, like their relationship is just background for the rest of the movie. It almost like there's a scene where like she has her dad and like her mum over into like Central Park where they've started building parts of the city, and there's these like magical sort of like walkways that just sort of take you around.
I hated this bit. It's only because they're portraying, like, don't get me wrong, visually, totally sci-fi, totally foreign. Yes. It's like light beams or whatever. But he's talking about like, you can hop on this and it'll take you anywhere you want in town in like 5 minutes or whatever. I'm like, cool. It's a moving sidewalk. You made a moving sidewalk.
Well, yeah, but they go up and stuff as well, so they're sort of like circling around buildings and whatnot.
Okay, sorry. You made a moving sidewalk and escalators. Congratulations.
Well, no, what got me about it though is he's like, yeah, this can get you to anything you need in the city within 5 minutes. And then like her mum steps on it and it's going like 1 mile an hour.
It's like, okay, so let's say I'm at the hospital on the west side of town and I need to get to the airport on the east side of town. Am I just going to be rapidly accelerated up to 60 miles an hour? Am I going to be like blowing my hair back or what's going on here?
I have no answers for you, so I shall not give you any.
But yeah, they at this point they have a dinner and she reveals she's pregnant, and that's where the mayor's just like, I cannot stand it. He is an evil man. And honestly, we never even got into why he hates him so much. It's literally just because, like, the mayor's trying to deal with the now. He's trying to deal with the problems that the people have inherently in front of them. Whereas Adam Driver's like, nah, man, we got to worry about the future. We got to worry about, like, what are our kids going to have? Yeah, that should be the focus.
Which is a fine thing if we're talking about like, climate change and we're talking about like, what we're leaving behind. But to be fair, the movie doesn't do a good job of like making me side with them, because the mayor's like, no, I need to make sure people have jobs and they have infrastructure and they have like these things they need. And I'm like, you know what? The mayor's making a lot of sense here. I think I kind of on his side.
All right, so let me. This is a good enough point as I need to jump in with this Roman conspiracy thing, because it's kind of interesting to me the way Coppola approached this, and that is the conspiracy was the mayor. I'm blanking on his last name. Something. Cicero. That's it. Cicero was the Roman guy in charge. He was elected. And then Catalina was a guy who tried to get elected a few times, ended up not being able to. And then he led a revolt. He led a uprising, more or less, by basically telling everyone, hey, we'll cancel all your debts if I come in charge. We're going to take down the Senate. We're going to do whatever. And we're going to start a new Rome. What Coppola did was he looked at that conspiracy and he said, you know, Cicero's the one who made it out of that, like, unscathed. He was the winner there. It's probably told from his perspective. Let's look at it as if Catalina is the hero. So essentially, he made this movie about a guy who says, screw the government, I'm going to do things my own way, and made him the hero, while simultaneously doing that same, like, rising up the oppressed masses and all that, with Shia LaBeouf's character, but making him the villain. And it just feels like there is no through line as to, like, what the hell is good and evil in this movie. Like, everything is just so squished together of, like, you kind of like this guy, but he also kind of sucks.
Yeah, trying to root for anyone in this is pretty impossible. There's no good sense of, like, who you want to side with. I think the big thing for me is, like I'm all for an art house movie, and I'm all for, like, things being a little abstract, but I think each scene in an art house movie on its own has to work in its own kind of way, right? So you can have a scene that is long and drawn out and is focusing on the details and is focusing on the atmosphere. If it's done in a way where it feels like you're still sort of building some drama or tension in the scene itself, right? Where, so take like a slow David Lynch scene or something like that, where it's kind of weird and it's kind of off kilter and it's not just telling like a simple normal story in the way that you normally would, but you build a little bit of intrigue of like, okay, what is the character doing here? Okay, what is the purpose by the end? Like, okay, they're at this motel. Why are they at the motel? Like, he's walking to this room. Who is he here to see? You sort of keep building it, and then by the end of the scene, while you may not understand the whole context, you understand to some extent what the character accomplished by the end of that scene. There's large stretches of this movie where there's just artsy-fartsy montages and like Roman-style dialogue being spouted, or Shakespeare being spouted as. It's all just pretension. There's never a moment where you get to just enjoy what's actually happening, and it's the reason why is stupid and is like clearly pervy old man is that Aubrey Plaza and Shia LaBeouf scene is. It's one of the few scenes where I'm like, I understand the purpose, like I understand what this is doing to the plot, I understand how this is advancing the story. It's far too late, admittedly, for me to give a crap, but I understood what was going on.
Even then, I think that up until... So there's one more sequence where once he hears about the baby, the mayor goes to Adam Driver and says, look, I'll admit that you were innocent and that I will get behind you and do all this stuff, but like, please stop being with my daughter. I really don't like you, but I'll say whatever as long as you let my daughter be her own thing. And he offers up this red envelope, which apparently has a signed confession inside of it. Doesn't really ever come back. But I think that is the last scene in this movie that feels like there's still a chance of coming out of this coherently, coming out of this with an actual plot that like could have a rising and falling structure here. Because the next thing that happens is the gunshot of him being shot in the car, and after that, it goes off the damn rails.
Yeah, after that, it's just like him healing. There's some more mumbo jumbo with his eye obviously glowing and all that from where it's healing. And
he's like got this crazy tick now where he's like is wearing bandages. He's just screaming like, no, 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 over and over again.
Chewing the scenery. This is Adam Driver so just unleashing, and just like I was laughing a little bit at the performance at this point. And and it's right around here where a lot of the other stuff with LaBeouf and Plaza is like all kicking off, right? Because we're in that kind of chunk of the movie, and it kind of feels like Adam Driver and his other characters that are more related to him just kind of fall to the background for a bit. And then by the time the other plot wraps up, it's just like, oh, the city's done. It's time for a presentation. The movie ends with a presentation of, hey, Megalopolis is open, and like out of nowhere at the end, the mayor's with them, and he willingly gets on the little platform to go up to the stage, and he just says, hey, promise me you two will build responsibly. And he says, of course I will. And they shake hands.
And the baby is born by this point as well.
Yeah, like, the baby's just there.
Like, at least a year, several years, in fact.
Yeah, the baby's just there, and they lay the baby down on the carpet, and they do this effect here where it's like the floor's invisible, so we're looking up at them from underneath the floor. And like he says, time freeze, but everyone freezes in the scene, including like him and Julia, and just the baby, just their daughter, who presumably has these powers too, is still moving around and crying, or not crying, but giggling or gaggling a little bit.
Making little baby noises. Yeah. And because the baby doesn't know how to unfreeze time, she's going to be stuck like that for all of eternity, time never moving forward again, and we are stuck in this hellscape forever.
Nah, she'll accidentally unstick them maybe in like 4 years. She'll just make the right noise.
All of a sudden, like, it's New Year's Eve. They're like 3, 2, 1, and then boop, the kid is 5 years old.
But the movie ends with the screen vignette and all. I mean, there's been vignettes all throughout the movie, whenever it just feels like it. But this is one where it comes in gradually and ends the movie.
It ends with that, but then we get again, carved in stone, like all the other titles have been, and children chanting a pledge of allegiance to the human race.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. And by the way, we skipped over also in the middle there, after he had healed up and all that, is where we get the full-on like speech of him basically saying like, this is what Megalopolis is. This is why I am the man who's going to be leading people.
I had honestly everything I said about it, I said earlier when I talked about compared to Neil Breen. I don't know if I've got anything else to say about his shitty speech. I
mean, it's just, again, I hate Atlas Shrugged so much, and it is a movie trilogy that is honestly worthy of extra reels. But we can't. There is no way to talk about that without me just being like righteously political the entire time. But that's what this reminded me of, because famously in Atlas Shrugged, the speech that the character gives at the end takes up, I'm forgetting the exact number, but it's at least 40 pages of just a monologue of saying, like, this is what mankind needs to do. It needs to leave rich people alone. And this is what that felt like. It felt like him just getting up in front and saying, like, I've made the greatest city on earth, hail me. And the crowd is like, hail you. You're the best. Like, oh, it pisses me off so much.
Jason Schwartzman's in this as well, by the way. Just he's around.
Yeah, he's around. He's just floating. He's like the mayor's assistant.
Yeah, I have nothing to say about him.
Oh, there's also Dustin Hoffman, apparently, that in an interstitial that is completely just jumped through. He was running opposite of Shia LaBeouf's for like some political thing and then was killed. And then we just get like one glimpse of like rocks falling on him. And it's like, well,
That's
he's
right.
done with.
That was such a non-event. And even because obviously we said Adam Driver gets shot. He's shot by a child who's wanting like an autograph or whatever. And it's like a shocking little moment. But the implication is that Shia LaBeouf's friend like hired this kid to do it, which, by the way, Shia LaBeouf's friend, for some reason we get like an origin story of how Shia LaBeouf like it recruits this guy. There's like a parade for the mayor at one point, like fairly early on in the movie, and all of a sudden there's just this moment where like a couple of the marching band are just sort of like chilling against the wall, and Shia LaBeouf, who's with his sisters who he has sex with in his big limo, and he looks over and sees this guy who's like the tuba player or whatever. He's like, hey, you want to come over here? And he just leaves his marching band, walks over, and from the rest of the movie, he's just his henchman now.
Yeah. He just does whatever he says. There's this one bit, it's right before the Aubrey Plaza sex scene, which is they are entering into the building, and by they, I mean Shia LaBeouf, his friend, and two other goons. And they do this weird thing of, like, Shia takes off his coat, throws it to the guy behind him, then that guy takes off his coat, throws it to the guy behind him. And then that guy takes off his coat, throws the guy behind him. And then Shia LaBeouf throws down his hat and says, pick up my hat. And the guy behind him throws off his hat and says, pick up my hat. And the guy behind him throws that. It's like, what is this beat?
This is like an old school comedy beat. This is like a not Lauren Hardy, but like something of that era where it's like
Three Stooges sort of thing. It's such a weird beat. Like, I guess if you really want to go with it, it's this idea that, like, people in these sort of structures like having power over the people under them, but it's such a strange comedy beat.
Yeah, it doesn't fit tonally. Like, that's the thing. The movie, for the most part, I would say, wants to be taken seriously, which is why the whole John Voight doing the boner thing and then shooting Shia LaBeouf in the ass with an arrow just felt like, wait, are you just trying to be funny? Because this is a meme. You're cracking a joke here. And it doesn't feel like most of the movie was trying to be funny. It feels like it was trying to be taken seriously as like an arty, political, ethereal science fiction movie. It just forgot to, write compelling characters and give them some sort of through line that we could actually, I don't know, follow.
It felt like it was so concerned with being a metaphor that it forgot to make sense. Like, it was so overly concerned with, see, this is how we relate to Rome, that, like, when you start really poking at it, you're like, but that doesn't make any narrative sense. You forgot the metaphor halfway through and started a new one.
I think you have to do one or two things. You either have to have the characters kind of bring up some allusions to it at some point, or you can have the narration that talks about it in that way, but the characters themselves never compare themselves to Rome. Doing both just makes it feel like laid on so thick. It just
I honestly, if you stripped out all of the Rome stuff, and I mean all of it, I don't want there to be like any even like the stone engravings or anything like that. If you strip out all the Rome stuff, I think I would like this film at least 90% more. Mind you, that's only bringing it up like a tiny little bit because I don't like it at all. But still, I think that's a full improvement of how much I would be engaged with it, because it wouldn't just feel so pretentious.
Just change the names to, like, reference the names that you're referencing in, like, the this classic story. Like, like, instead of Caesar, have it be, I don't know, Christopher, but like have them all kind of correlate in some small way.
Again, it immediately as we started, it felt like Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet, where it's like, you have the character say, give me my longsword, and then he reaches for a musket that just says the word longsword on it, because, we're modernizing it, but we're not changing the words. We're keeping that part the same.
Yes, which is why it's weird when they start like, plugging in USB sticks to like play video files and whatnot, because it's
You just expect them to like hand over a scroll, and then they unwrap the scroll, and inside is a USB. There's a bit when they're doing the bidding on the Virgin, where everyone's holding up QR codes.
That's right.
And it just felt so strangely like, yeah, I guess that makes sense, but at the same time, it seems so much more complicated.
There is an art to a filmmaker and the people around them to making something that is like an abstract story that works, right? Mm-hmm. You know, I referenced David Lynch earlier. He's obviously arguably the most famous example of someone who knew how to do it, and it always felt like a coherent vision from someone, even if it was weird and didn't always make sense on initial viewing.
I would say this one less than Lynch, but admittedly I haven't seen a whole lot of Lynch stuff. It reminds me a lot of Aronofsky.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I could see comparisons to some Aronofsky stuff. And I think people would debate whether or not he's successful or not with some of his movies. But there's clearly there's definitely it's a big swing, and you can kind of respect it to an extent. But you also think that someone who made The Godfather would understand basic storytelling principles that sometimes people should follow some of the rules of narrative for a reason, because going off the rails, don't get me wrong, if you're good, if you're special, you can do it and it'll somehow work because you understand how to make each thing individually compelling. But I don't think this is a case of this. This is someone who has the cred from days gone by, the ability to raise the money somehow, who's able to just do whatever garbage they thought was cool in their head. And it's a mess. It's a bloated, like egotistical, pretentious mess.
Honestly, I think that the one thing that could have fixed this, strangely enough, is if he didn't have as much money. Like, if he was forced to really cut back on budget here and stop with this, like, over-the-top, huge special effects stuff, like, yeah, sure, get an image of what Megalopolis looks like and use it for very strict certain scenes towards the end, but, like, for the most of it, all he would really need is a vague, crystalline material that he calls Megalon, and just say it's able to do anything. And, like, you don't even need special effects for that. You just need it to give, like, a little light shimmer to just show it's a special thing. That's what they did for most of the movie. And I would say even the bit where he's, like, looking through the crystal, like, third eye sort of thing, that would be the extent of it. That would be the farthest you need to go. But having as much money as he did, that's where we get the crumbling structures from. That's where we get all the weird, crazy, like, multiple arms things going on.
The satellite coming down.
So much. Yeah, the satellite coming down.
And there's also just so many scenes where they want to have the city look kind of, you know, unique and stylized in the background. So there's a lot of shots where instead of it just being them shooting in the street or green screening in the regular city, oh no, it looks kind of different. It's got a bit more of an Art Deco kind of vibe at times, which is why when you see the MetLife building randomly at one point in a shot, it just feels weird and out of place. It's like, wait, no, that's just a real building. Like, what are we doing here? Yeah. So, very strange. It's definitely this like weird passion project that, yeah, it'll go down in history. It's such a weird comparison to make to a Neil Breen or even The Evil Within, which is a movie we did in streams once about this guy who was obsessed with making this little horror movie, and it was this little passion project, and just you can see where some of the ideas were coming from, maybe even from good places, but because it's not like I disagree with some of the messaging that he's probably trying to say here. Like, right. Like it's fine, I get it, but
yeah, the overall message basically seems to be, if you really boil it down to this artistic vision sort of idea, it's that if we want this American experiment to work, we need to have a driving goal that we're moving towards. And the Megalopolis seems to be this idea of that, where it's like, look, we're going to build this city. It may not solve all of our problems now, but it's something that we can work towards. They use the idea of the utopia over and over again. Yeah. This thing that we strive towards that seems unattainable, but it's at least something that if we really drive it down, then at least we're moving in the right direction. That's a well enough idea. I like that concept on paper. The issue being is that it's so bloated and so covered in everything else that the core idea essentially fades into the background.
Yeah, and almost every plot in it spends time feeling like they're missing. Like, it feels like at a certain point, Caesar and Julia fade to the background, and all of a sudden they've already got a kid, and I'm like, I feel like I've missed parts of their story here. Yeah. So very little of it was there actually satisfying on its own ways. It's constantly pretentious, and there's a large, and even if on a sort of it's funny bad kind of scenario, and there are moments that are enjoyably bad, there's large stretches of it just being tedious and just boring and nothing important happening. See the Colosseum bit where he's like, it's just like him having a montage of where he's completely off his tits on whatever. So
yeah.
Anyway, with all that said, David, what was your scene of the movie?
No. You know, I was actually thinking about this, like, as the movie was going on. I was like, all right, I need to pick something good from this movie. And I had trouble trying to define whether or not I wanted to pick something that I thought was actually respectable, something that I thought was actually well put together, or something that was, especially by the time I hit the end of the movie, totally off its rocker, just insanity. I think for representing the movie as a whole, if we're talking about like, what do I, if the MVP is the best person in the movie, the one who like best encapsulates the movie, if I'm picking the scene, it's got to be off its rocker. It's got to be off it. And just because of how much it has lodged itself into my head, and I hate every moment of it, I'm going with the Shia LaBeouf sex scene. Because it's just, from starting with that weird like transference of hats and coats thing, and then going even to the like sauna bit where we see like her leg and snake noises start playing. It is completely baffling to me how this part got to the point it did. It didn't need to be this, and yet somehow we ended up here. So I'm giving it to that.
I mean, I get it. I understand it. I think I'm going with the opening scene, and
that was my regular pick. Yeah.
It's a combination of it's actually fine on its own, and it was actually intriguing, and also because it actually made me think, oh, maybe there's hope. Maybe I'll actually like this. Maybe it'll actually be good. And it wasn't. It was all downhill. But it was just on its own. It was intriguing enough to make me think maybe, just maybe.
We had a choice. We had a chance here, and it just didn't pay off. By the way, I'm rewatching that scene with the bow and arrow under the blanket.
Oh yes.
I love how long it takes Jon Voight to actually like pull back the arrow and take the shot, because like anybody else would be out of the room by that point, but they're just standing around seeing what happens.
Like, he won't actually do it. All right, David, MVP of the movie.
This is actually a tough one. Not because anybody is doing a fantastic job, and I think it's actually split across people because they really deserve it, but because anybody that I think might deserve it has like 70% of their scenes be incredibly stupid, and honestly, it's
we know most of these people are good, right? Like that's the thing. This is not like a comment on acting ability per se. This is kind of acting mixed with character and the direction of their character, and like the weirdness that comes from that, and just how over the top some of the characters are.
Yeah, I can see everyone putting in good effort. The issue is how they are written. Like, there's no character that makes it out of this unscathed when it comes to bad writing. So if I'm looking down the list here, I don't think it's going to make it past Shia LaBeouf in terms of top credited cast. Laurence Fishburne was pretty good, but he just didn't have enough going for him throughout the movie
He's just
for me
there.
to say that he's MVP. Yeah. So that leaves Adam Driver, Giancarlo Esposito, Nathalie Emmanuel, Aubrey Plaza, Shia LaBeouf. Out of those, Julia's just boring.
Yeah.
I don't think I really liked Aubrey Plaza's character that much. She was entertaining at times, but for the most part, she felt pretty one note. I will say Shia at least had fun in the role. He was going nuts with it. We failed to mention that at the beginning. He's not just like a loser. Like, he is off his tits. He is like dancing around, doing little skips and stuff the whole way through.
He's licking people. He's doing all sorts. He dresses as a woman for the Colosseum bit.
Yep. So there's a lot going on with him. So do I think that outshines our main two characters of the mayor and Caesar? And I'm gonna say, yeah. At least when Shia LaBeouf's on screen, I know that even if things are pretentious as hell, he's gonna say them in an entertaining way. The other two, he had a 50-50 shot. I think the mayor did some good scenes when he's like doing the whole speeches to the crowd. He got really over the top there, but most of the time's not that. And then same for Adam Driver, where he occasionally has like a funny moment, like that no screaming stuff. But for the most part, he's just playing the Adam Driver I know, where it's kind of like this reserved, tortured man who isn't understood. So I think I'm going to give it to Shia LaBeouf.
Yeah, it's tough. I see the problem I'm having here is I don't really like the characters. So I'm finding myself drawn to Giancarlo Esposito and Aubrey Plaza, but that's only because I like them a lot from other things. You know, it's Gus from Saul and Bad, and it's Aubrey Plaza from Parks and Rec and numerous other things that I've liked her in. So those two are sticking out, but it's just because I like them from other things.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is tough. I don't know. I really don't. I will.
I mean, you could theoretically give it to someone behind the camera as well, or something else. But like, do you think the DP really deserves it?
Deserves something.
It deserves a swift kick in the ass.
No, I mean, to be fair, like, I mean, the DP I think does a good job with the material that he is asked of. Right, or she.
I just, once it hits like the third montage, I just say, all right, too much visual style. I'm done with this.
But that's not the DP that's responsible for
I know it's not, but I can't help but just blame them. It's also just caught up in the hellfire of it.
Yeah, maybe I should thank the editor, because I think the original cut of this was almost 4 hours long. Maybe I should just say,
oh my god,
yes. The editor, he cut it down to 2 hours and 18 minutes, which is still too long, but it's much better.
That's perfectly reasonable.
There you go, that's my pick.
All right.
Or whoever told him, no, it has to be shorter, that's my MVP.
You just know, though, that he's sitting there with his director's cut now, being like, geez. I gotta get this out. This is gonna make him like it.
The Coppola cut. All right. What are you rating Megalopolis?
All right, so I'm looking back about a year ago. When we did Rebel Moon Part 2, and then like a month later we did Atlas.
Oh yes.
Both of those kind of hit a similar vibe for me in terms of like, you clearly put a lot of money into this, but I don't know where it went to. That being said, this one frustrated me more than Atlas for sure. Atlas was just kind of a stupid movie. Rebel Moon Part 2 is where it's really hitting that same level of, I hate this on a conceptual level. I hate like the story being told here. So I think I gotta probably rate it around that point. And if we're looking at it through that lens, yeah, I'd say a 2.5. I don't think I can quite get down to the 2 just because there are moments of visual flair to it that I appreciate. And I can understand the conceit of you want to tell an American fable to say, hey, we're going down a bad path. Let's see if we can turn around. I like the idea. It's just everything you did with it after you had the idea didn't work for me. So 2.5.
Yeah, I think you're in the right kind of range. I'm tempted to say 3 out of 10. More just my gut more than anything. I don't really have any real.
Once you get under like a 4, it's all gut.
It kind of, yeah, like it was kind of like dull and like difficult to get through at points, but it didn't make me as angry as some other things have. Maybe just because at least there was some stupid ideas occasionally, or at least the audacity of it on some level. I can say, okay, Coppola, you've got balls. I'll give you that. So, yeah, 3 out of 10. But
all right.
I cannot recommend
no
such a thing.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
So David's got his homework movie in a second. Don't worry about that. We'll come to that in a bit. Next week on the show, we're looking at a movie called Come True, which is another sort of, released from the last few years, another small sci-fi movie. So I'd heard some good things about this one, so we'll see how it shapes up next time. Of course, you can support the show and get bonus stuff over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. You can get a couple of monthly shows from me and David. One is Criterion Cut, where we review the Criterion Collection movies. And then there's the Extra Reels, where we review some of the worst movies of all time. This might have belonged on that show in some ways, but that's okay.
I was debating about showing up with the Criterion jacket on for this review. Just being like, well, clearly it's a Coppola movie. It's gotta make it in there.
Yes. So you can get those shows, plus there's also a new monthly show with me and Connor where we just talk about all the different random movies we've been watching throughout the month. It's kind of like a casual movie catch-up show. So that's less big conversations like these ones and more just little, 5 minutes spoiler-free kind of impressions and things of a bunch of different movies. So if that all sounds good, you can get all that on Patreon. The main purpose of which, though, is to help keep all the content coming and keep it all viable. So if you want to support, you could do that over there. Or via YouTube membership if you like. I always recommend Patreon because you'll get all the bonus content and it's a little bit cheaper. But YouTube membership, if you prefer that, is an option as well. So... plus comment, like, subscribe, all the usual stuff. But every week on the Ace, David goes back to a movie that was on the show before he joined and catches up on it. What was this week's homework movie, David?
Well, sticking with the 2020s, trying to get through as many of those as humanly possible. I thought, well, Megalopolis is going to suck.
Okay.
So maybe I could watch something worse than it, and it would make the movie seem better by comparison.
Oh, you stupid slut.
Here's the thing. I went into it fully assuming that I was going to watch something worse than it. Now that we're done, I'm not convinced. But I watched Moonfall.
I hate to admit it, but I think I enjoyed Moonfall more than I enjoyed Megalopolis.
Yeah. So I watched Moonfall first. I watched it before Megalopolis, just get it out of the way. And the recurring thought in my mind as we're going through Moonfall is this movie is a parody that doesn't know it's a parody. Like every single scene in it felt like it felt like a very well-made like YouTube video. Like they got a couple of like famous people in it, and I just kept waiting for the shoe to drop where it's like, oh no, turns out this is actually a comedy. But every single scene, it just kept taking itself seriously. And I couldn't shake that the entire time, where I was just waiting for it to admit to me that it was not trying to be serious, but every single time it's like, oh yeah, no, like, gravity waves are coming, you gotta watch out, and then they do the stupidest CGI thing I've ever seen. Add on top of that, there's just so many bits in here where like they're making fun of the conspiracy theorists and then making new conspiracies. And I get what they're going for, but it just pisses me off on a primal level of like, could we not like try to make some sense, even a little bit? Like I don't need anything fantastic. I was fully willing to accept the conceit of 2012, which honestly I think that's the most comparable movie to this one. This one just got extra stupid though, where they're just like, yeah, this is first 10 minute stuff, but like there was an alien swarm that clearly showed up on video feeds and burrowed into the moon. But no one's going to check that out for a decade and a half. Like, whatever. It's not worth finding out about. Like, are you kidding me? That sounds insane to me. But it has to happen that way for the plot to happen. And that's kind of the rest of everything else. Is everything's so contrived. Of like, there's one point where they have 20 minutes to do an entire rocket launch before it becomes too late from like beginning to end. And I'm like, that doesn't seem feasible. I can see why people would have fun with it. But ultimately, the entire time, I was left just annoyed and confused. So, would I put it above Megalopolis? Probably, because at least that one is stupid fun, whereas this Megalopolis is just kind of stupid. I think I'd probably end up giving it still pretty close to the bottom though, like a 3.5. That's just, you got to go into it knowing you're getting Moonfall. If you go into it expecting anything else, you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, I don't really remember much of the movie, really, other than just lots of CG and...
Yeah. Honestly, I think one of my biggest critiques, though, is that they decided to do that thing where it's like, yeah, we got this team up in space, but we also have to worry about the team down on Earth. And then they made the team down on Earth the most boring plot I could possibly imagine for when a moon is crashing down to the Earth.
Oh, dear. All right. And you felt that was an important one to catch up on, did you?
My level is that I'm just going through the average ratings top to bottom, and for some reason Tara gave that a 7.5, which bumped the average rating up significantly.
Okay, well, that's the show, everyone. That's the Atomic Cinema Experiment. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next time for Come True. And of course, check out Collector's Cut, our other movie podcast that we do. Actually, is Airport Season still going when this goes out? I can't remember.
No idea. Let me check.
No, it finished already.
Yep.
Bruce Lee season's just starting over in Collector's Cut.
Yes, this weekend.
So go check out that. But yeah, we just did the entire Airport franchise from the 70s, if that sounds like a fun time as well. And you can, enjoy the show on your Apple Podcasts, your Spotify, plus any app that catches the podcasts, like Podcast Addict, stuff like that. Just in case any of those conveniences are easier. And of course, YouTube, which can also function as a podcast system as well now on YouTube Music. So anyway, that is the show. Thank you very much for joining. We do appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and computer, add salsa.